Hey, my friends, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and as many of you know, maybe some of you don't, I hail from the American West. My family has a triangle of existence and influence where all our stories happen that goes like this. The west corner is out by Yellowstone. That's like the northwest corner of this inverted triangle of influence. It's by Yellowstone National Park, like Jackson, Wyoming, that kind of thing. Then we're going to follow that east, and the upper right corner of the triangle is the Black Hills, Rapid City, South Dakota. That's where I live now. It's where my mom's from, where she went to high school. And then if you go down to the bottom point of the triangle, I guess that would be Denver-ish, Colorado. And my family, we've all lived all around in there. School, college, all of that stuff. I was born in Chadron, Nebraska. My parents went to college there. And that's where I'm from. And so the things that happened here historically, it all feels like old hat to me. When I go and visit somebody else's part of the world, I see things that for you see every day, and probably like, yeah, I don't know, whatever. They got castles or ancient Greek stuff. It's fine. I go about my business. That's kind of how I am with markers about the Oregon Trail and the Old West and cowboys and Indians and stuff like that. But they're all over the place out here. You see a little pullout on the side of the road, and you'll see some kind of little stone pillar sort of thing, and there'll be a bronze cast plate on there, as you can feel the letters with your hands if you want to. And it'll say Jedediah and Elizabeth Montgomery Fulton Williams died on this spot as they attempted to cross the Great Divide Basin here in central Wyoming. Something like that. It's almost always sad. And they're just everywhere because I think there's this impulse in the West to honor the people who made the effort to try and set up shop or traverse this really rather inhospitable chunk of land. Wyoming, I don't know if you've been there or not, but it's beautiful, but it is also mean. Then these poor people, they got carts back in the day. They're trying to cross this thing with oxen, and that's what inspired that Oregon Trail game where everybody dies of dysentery. So we got these markers all over the place, and I think they're appropriate to commemorate the stories of the people who took the big swings back then. I get it. When you see something like that, you know that even if you don't totally understand why what they did was a big deal, it's worth writing down their name. Likewise, that is what we are getting in Ezra chapter 2, as we get to a place where the exiles have been allowed to go back and rebuild Jerusalem. And this is a gigantic deal, and you would think that everybody would sign up to go do it, but only a tiny minority sign up to go back and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem and reestablish the worship of God there and the sacrificial system. I mean, really, in a lot of ways, it's like the union of God's people with God has been broken for going on 100 years, 70 years at this point in history, because there's not sacrifices happening. And that was integral to the way the relationship was built. That was how you fixed the damage that was done on the human side toward God, is a much bigger deal than what you or I might imagine thinking in modern contemporary terms. And so in Ezra chapter 2, we get one of those chapters that people are going to be tempted to just skip over because it looks like a whole bunch of names. And what do you know? We're only taking one day on it, so we're kind of skipping over it too. But these names are important, and writing it down and commemorating this is important. And I think it's really telling the way the author of Ezra and Nehemiah breaks this down, this little miniature census of returning exiles, the heroes who rounded up their families and led their clans almost as chieftains in exile on this big journey back to Jerusalem. So let's look at this here. Ezra 2 verse 1, this is how the whole thing gets framed up. Now these are the people of the province who came up from the captivity of the exiles, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had taken captive to Babylon. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to his own town, in the company with Zerubbabel, Jeshua, Nehemiah, Sariah, Reelaiah, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mispar, Bigvai, Rehum, and Baanah. I don't think, as a programming note here, that is the same Mordecai that we're looking at in the book of Esther. That doesn't totally add up. Maybe it's possible that the kid Mordecai was a part of this trip, but I think we're talking about a different dude there. Now, Zerubbabel, I never know how to say it, is somebody we need to talk about more because he's a part of the kingly line of David. That would have popped for people in the know who were aware of this kingly line that was really important, that's all tied in with God's redemptive plan and a whole bunch of promises that are yet to be fulfilled, but that's going to be a conversation for another day. So there's your setup. These are the people who went back, and now here is how this list of names that is commemorated, the list of the men of the people of Israel. And first we get families. The descendants of Parash and a bunch of other people, Elam, Zatu, Bani, Azgad. These are cool names. Bigvai, that's a cool name. Sounds like a nickname for like your number 4 hitter on a softball team, Big Vi. And then you get a number to go with all of these families, and that number tells you how many of the descendants of each of these people made the trip. So 1,254 descendants of Elam made the trip. 642 descendants of Bani made the trip. And so you get that, and then next you get a census that tells you about the men of various cities who made the trip. So what you can see after just 2 of these lists that we're getting here early on in the book of Ezra is that it was hard to figure out how to categorize everybody. The organizational structure protocol here was difficult to figure out. But what it looks like we're getting here is a bunch of different ways that people could validate their ethnic and religious identity. Clearly, there's an impulse in Ezra and Nehemiah to say this is the inheritance of the people of God. And if you can't demonstrate that you are a part of the people of God, if there's not a clear provenance of your family line, if you don't have some claim to this rebuilding, you're not going to get to be a part. We'll talk about what all of that means and why it matters as we move along. So first we get the list of the families, the descendants of these different people, and now we're going to get people from different cities. So for example, we see that there were 123 men from Bethlehem. We see that there were 52 men from Nebo. We see that there were 320 men from Harim. We see that there were 345 men from Jericho. Then next up, we get a short list of priests. Now, not just anybody could be a priest. You had to be descended from a certain family in a certain way. And, well, a lot of them came back. My goodness. Verse 36 of Ezra 2, the priests, the descendants of Jedidiah through the family of Jeshua, 973, of Immer, 1,052, of Pashur, 1,247, of Harim, 1,017. Hold on a minute. How many is it? Hang on. I'm going to do some math. This is interesting. All right, 973 plus 1,052 plus 1,247 plus 1,017. Okay, that's 4,289, and we're going to divide that by the total number of people who made the trip, 42,360. Dang, over 10% of the people who made this trip were priests. So that's pretty wild. The job was super appealing. I've never thought about this before, and the numbers just jumped out at me right now. This cause was super appealing for these priests, and I guess that makes sense, right? I mean, what are they doing? They can't offer sacrifices somewhere else. They, I suppose, had just learned the trade from their dad and maybe from their granddad, but they never actually got to do it. So they're probably just champing at the bit. Like, get me back to Jerusalem. Let's build this temple. I'll build it myself if I have to. I want to get going on this because they understood the spiritual significance, the theological significance, the ethnic and religious identity significance, the place in the grand redemptive plan that the sacrificial system held. They understood all of this, and yet here they are, never getting to do their actual craft. And especially one that's bigger than just their love of their art or what they do. I mean, for them, this is a much bigger deal than that. It makes sense to me that 10% of the total people who would make the trip would be of this class of worker. But this is really interesting. Check this out. Here's the next group of people who come along, the Levites. And here it says, okay, the Levites descended from Jeshua, 74. And then there were some singers descended from Asaph. Oh, I've never connected that dot before either. That's embarrassing. Asaph, that's the guy who did a bunch of the Psalms, right? Oh, maybe I've read that before. Maybe I've connected that, but it seemed fresh to me. Wow. I mean, that's pretty impressive. This guy had an entire set of descendants who also did music. That's awesome. So 74, 128, and there were gatekeepers of the temple. There were 139 of those. Comparatively, you've got 300 and change Levites who are eager to get back, but why would you have this huge disparity between priests and Levites? Well, the priests, like I was talking about, they were the ones who actually do the sacrifices and mediate between God and man. Their role is hugely important. They don't have anything else to do. But the Levites are a group that was established a little later on, and their role was more of a support role, a deacon role now. Deacon is more like taking care of people. Well, like in a Baptist church in the United States, you'll have deacons, and they do two roles. They help out with people in need, kind of like what you get early on in the book of Acts, like chapter 6-ish. And they find out, what do the widows in the church need? They do a degree of individual care for people in the church. But deacons, a lot of times, will also have a bit of an overlap with what is often called a trustee team. And they will handle some of the practical stuff. Like sometimes the deacons will prepare communion in a Protestant church. They would get that ready. They would prepare the baptismal for a baptism. So it's a practical role in meeting the needs of people, also in setting up the ordinances, or what some would call the sacraments of the church. So that would be kind of what the Levites are doing compared with the priests, who are the ones who actually execute on all of this. And obviously the priests, by sheer numbers, we're a lot more excited to get back in the game, get this temple built, and get things moving again than the Levites, who it's a much more accessible position. It's probably much easier to become a Levite. And yet it looks like for every one Levite, which is the easier to achieve position, you've got 10 priests, which is the harder to achieve position. I thought that was interesting. And on an unrelated note, would you look at the time? It goes so fast when we learn in real time together. And I did learn stuff today. This is fun. But here's the thing. In the same way that you go around the American West in my family's little triangle of existence in Cowboys and Indians territory, and you just see these little placards all over the place to honor these people who bravely trekked across this place, or these two chiefs who bravely set aside their differences to work things out between their tribes. In the same way that all of these markers of bravery and courage in the moment are scattered all around my little neck of the woods, so I view Ezra chapter 2 as kind of a plaque to commemorate the people who were willing to take this big swing and do this dangerous, risky, but very important thing with no guarantee of success, even though they were going back to something that had long been settled and established because of what had happened with Nebuchadnezzar and in the ensuing time. It really, in a lot of ways, was like they were frontiersmen going out to the unknown and the unexplored at great risk to life and limb with no guarantee of success. I think there's something really intrepid about these people, and I admire it. And tomorrow, we'll just keep chipping away at this list and try to figure out what it means and why it's in here and how it pertains to what we're doing with Ezra and Nehemiah. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.